We begin tonight with breaking news on Capitol Hill as the longest government shutdown in U.S. history enters its 40th day. A deal to end it may be in reach. A Democratic senator told ABC News that they will likely have enough Democratic votes to pass a Republican bill extending government funding into the new year. The Senate holding a rare Sunday session today. ABC News is also learning that the proposal does not include the Democrats' demand to extend Obamacare subsidies to prevent premiums from soaring for millions of Americans. This as Americans who rely on food SNAP benefits are in legal limbo and facing a food shortage crisis. The Trump administration is ordering states to, quote, immediately undo any steps taken to issue full SNAP benefits. And President Trump says he'll issue a dividend of at least $2,000 to Americans, except for, quote, high-income people. ABC's senior White House correspondent Selena Wang leads us off.
Tonight, on day 40 of the government shutdown, a potential end finally in sight. After working all weekend, senators near a deal to reopen the government. A senior Democratic senator tells ABC News there will likely be enough Democrats to pass a Republican bill to extend government funding until the end of January. Multiple sources tell ABC the deal does not include Democrats' key demand to extend Obamacare subsidies so premiums don't skyrocket for millions of Americans. Instead, sources say Democrats will only get a promise of a future vote on health care. Many remain skeptical, and any deal would need to clear the House as well.
They're telling us they're going to cheat on an agreement, and we need, in whatever agreement we reach, to have some really solid guarantees in that legislation that they simply can't go and renege after it's done.
Caught in the middle, 42 million low-income Americans who rely on SNAP food benefits. The Trump administration ordering states to immediately undo any steps taken to issue full SNAP benefits, threatening financial penalties if they don't comply. The order coming after at least 20 states, including Kansas, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, and Minnesota, said they had started the process of issuing full benefits. Families in those states finding themselves once again in limbo, like Christina Morales, a mom in Connecticut who just received her SNAP payment, but now fearful it won't last.
How much did you have left in your account?
23 cents.
23 cents?
Yes.
Were you choosing between feeding yourself or your kids?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's what any parent would do.
Last week, a federal court ordered the Trump administration to pay out those benefits, but they appealed, and Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson allowed the administration to pause those payments for now. Today, Trump officials claiming they can't legally dip into emergency funds to pay for SNAP.
We're very glad that we found a way to get a lot of the SNAP money out, but it's really pushing the boundaries of the law.
23 cents remaining. That really puts it all in perspective. Selena, we know President Trump is now floating a new idea about direct payments to some Americans. What would that entail? Who would it include?
That's right, Lindsay. The president says he wants to give $2,000 to every American except for high earners using money that the government has collected from tariffs. But a plan like that would likely need congressional approval. And today, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said he has not discussed it with the president. He also said the idea may be referring to tax breaks already in President Trump's agenda, Lindsay.
Selena Wang from the White House. Thanks so much, Selena.
Senator from Vermont.
I understand that the way the process has been developed, it is impossible to delay the votes that are going to take place. And if that were not the case, that is certainly what I would do, because I think it is important that the American people fully understand what is being voted on today. Everybody in America knows that our current healthcare system is broken. It is dysfunctional, it is cruel, it is by far the most expensive healthcare system in the world, and the only healthcare system of any major country that does not guarantee healthcare to all people as a human right, covering every man, woman, and child. We are unique in that respect. And yet tonight, what this Senate is about to do is make a horrific situation even worse. So let's be clear what this vote is about. If this vote succeeds, over 20 million Americans are going to see at least a doubling in their premiums in the Affordable Care Act. In my state of Vermont and throughout this country, for certain groups of people, it will be a tripling and a quadrupling of their premiums. There are people who will now be paying 50% of their limited incomes for health care. Does anybody in the world think that makes sense? And if this resolution is passed tonight, we are on a pathway to throw 15 million Americans off of Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. 15 million. Our job is to create universal health care. Guarantee health care to every man, woman, and child, not throw 15 million people off the health care they have, low income and working class people. And my friends, know what you are voting on. Studies are out there that when you throw 15 million people off of health care, some 50,000 of our fellow Americans will die unnecessarily every single year. Anyone think that's funny? Something to laugh at? Something to just go past? I don't. 50,000 Americans die unnecessarily. Now, I know as part of this resolution that the majority leader is going to say, well, Democrats can put together their own bill and it'll come to the floor here in the Senate for a vote. As everybody here knows, that is a totally meaningless gesture. You can get 100 votes here in the Senate. Won't mean anything because the House is not going to take it up, and the President of the United States certainly will not sign it. So, Mr. President, I hope that anybody here who is thinking of voting for this reconsiders, goes back home and talks to their constituents and asks them what it will mean if their health care premiums are doubled or tripled. Thank you, Mr. President.
News Nation's Hannah Brandt live for us in the Russell Rotunda tonight with the very latest. And Hannah, what are we hearing?
Well, Natasha, this hour, it looks like this new proposal to reopen the government and end this shutdown does have enough votes to pass. Of course, it's not a done deal until it is, right? And we're expecting votes to take place sometime in the next hour, according to Senate Republican leadership, who says at this point they're feeling pretty good about their chances to get this proposal across the finish line. So let's talk about exactly what's in this new deal to potentially reopen the government. You're taking a look at some of the key pieces here. This proposal would fund the government at its current levels through the end of the month of January. It would also include 3 appropriation bills for a full year of funding for military construction and Veterans Affairs, the Agriculture Department, which means money for the SNAP program, and the legislative branch, which is, of course, Congress. Plus, this proposal, we're told by Democrats, would rehire federal workers who were laid off during this shutdown and give full back pay to all federal workers. What isn't included in this package, though, is a solution for those health care subsidies that have been at the heart, this key issue of this shutdown. Those subsidies, remember, they're set to expire next month. Democrats have been pushing all along to try and extend them. But this proposal does not do that. What we're told instead by Democrats is that Majority Leader John Thune, as part of this agreement, has promised to hold a vote on that issue soon. But holding a vote doesn't guarantee that it'll actually pass, meaning there's no guarantee for Democrats that they'll be able to get those healthcare subsidies extended. And it certainly doesn't guarantee a vote on this issue in the House either. Now, tonight, President Trump expressing optimism about where things stand, even as we have some Democrats saying they're disappointed in how this all turned out. Take a listen.
It looks like we're getting very close to the shutdown. We'll never agree to give any substantial money or any money to really prisoners, illegals that come into our country. And I think the Democrats understand that. And it looks like we're getting close to the shutdown ending.
No deal without health care. So far as I'm concerned, health care isn't included, and so I'll be a no.
Right right now, we're waiting for that vote to happen as we watch, as you see on the Senate floor, what's happening there. But I have to stress, this will not be an immediate end to the shutdown. We've got to go through several steps here in the Senate, even though it looks like this proposal is on a track to pass. That's something that could take hours or even days. And then once it does pass through the Senate, it'll have to go back to the House and pass over there. And that would be the official end to this shutdown, Natasha. So we've still got some time to wait for that to happen.
Yeah, just the first potential step, and we are monitoring it. Hannah Brandt at the Capitol for us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our News Nation app right
Joining us now.
Welcome the 45th and 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, as the President swears in the seats of our United States military. Please raise your right hands. I, and state your name, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States. To the same, and that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me according to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God. Congratulations. Congratulations.
It is always a fun reminder for Donald Trump that when he doesn't surround himself with absolute sycophants and loyalists, that regular Americans really do not like the guy. And they put that on full display today at the Commanders-Lions game, where that was the reaction from the crowd when he began speaking and swearing in members of the U.S. military. Now, it shouldn't
Joining us now is Florida Senator Ashley Moody. Senator Moody, listen, I don't know if you are a fan of either of those teams. You got some pretty good ones down there in Florida, but I'm sure you support the veterans and those that were signing up on the field there.
The oldest boy in our family is in officer training right now in the United States Army, and whenever the president swears the new officers in or new people that have enlisted into our armed services, it is so meaningful, so important for other people to see people putting themselves out there to serve their fellow man and their country. To me, it is incredibly inspirational, not just because we have a family member that is in the Army, but because I now get to serve in this incredible role as the rookie in the United States Senate. to be truly a guardian of this nation. And that's why this shutdown has been so disappointing, so challenging and frustrating for so many of us.
Yeah, you called yourself a rookie, not me, but I guess it is a little bit of trial by fire now. You're in the belly of it. You've seen the worst of how politics plays into making decisions for Americans. We've had this shutdown for far too long, and it's just a handful, just a couple of Democrats needed. The scuttle is maybe up to 8 are crossing over. I looked at the list. There aren't many Democrats up for re-election. Maybe John Ossoff is one that could be picked off, but outside of that, does that play a big role in how quickly some of these jump over and vote for this?
Well, look, I expect we will take a vote tonight. This will include what we call a minibus, a few of our appropriations bills, and then another stab at a continuing resolution with some amendments. I hope that this will pass. It has to pass. 40 days of a shutdown, the longest in the United States history, is unacceptable. This could have been avoided, but for the Democrats wanting to put on political show and the Americans having to pay a price for that. It's time for them to come to the table. It's long past overdue. I also believe we need to address legislation or a rule change that if we go into a shutdown, that senators don't get to fly back and forth home. They lose money to do that. That their pay gets held, just like our troops and our law enforcement and all of the other people that are hurting. This would have ended a long time ago if we made that rule change, and I've been pushing for that as a new United States Senator. I've been here 10 months, and I already understand quickly why the American people don't trust and dislike D.C.
Well, Senator, we got a lot of frustrations, and I'm glad that you're picking up on those. The American people are wondering why people are getting paid while everything is in disarray. But I want to get into what's at the center of all this. It's the health care issue and this shutdown debate. Democrats are dismissing President Trump's plan to redirect Obamacare subsidies to Americans so they can purchase their own plans. We've got one of your colleagues there, Senator Adam Schiff, earlier today. Take a listen.
We have no idea what the president means by that, except it sounds like what he means is the same old tired proposal of repealing the Affordable Care Act, giving people a benefit in the form of a health savings account, but allowing insurance companies once again to cancel policies and refuse to write policies for people who have pre-existing health conditions.
Senator, is he mischaracterizing what the president and some Republicans are supporting here?
This should surprise no one. So the Republicans came together. We started looking at why have we just added another $1 trillion to our national debt in the fastest period in the history of our country? And if you look at the skyrocketing costs of health care, they are solely caused by the structure that we have in place right now. And that is because we found out that it is directly skyrocketing prices to consumers. There's money going to insurance companies like you wouldn't believe. There are people signed up on ghost policies. There is fraud all over the place, money going to pay for illegal immigrants to get health care. So if we are going to lower costs, we have to think outside the box. And this should surprise no one that Schumer, the shill for insurance companies, and Schiff, that they're going to come out and be like, no. Do you know who funds their campaigns? Like, I want to say 90% of donations from the insurance companies went to Kamala Harris in the last election. I mean, we have to get a hold of this, but they cannot shut down the government and blame it on because we have to lower healthcare prices. Their healthcare plan totally wrecked prices for everybody across this country. And so we've called them out on it. We have all of these studies that show that. And so when we've called it out and we've ended it, now they're trying to say we're going to shut down the government. Of course they are, because they're losing their gravy train.
Right. Senator Moody, Kevin Cork here. Frankly, I feel like they should just doze the hell out of the whole thing, because there's a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse. Take you up to Minneapolis, Minnesota. Trust me, there's a lot to be found there. But I want to talk about something that you've actually co-sponsored. That's the Eliminate Shutdowns Act, which is, frankly, designed to prevent these kinds of things from ever happening again. So I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind telling us about your legislation, and are you getting any support from other senators?
Yeah, you see a lot of Republican senators pushing forward on these things. We cannot let this happen again. You know, when we have to address policy, if there's something going wrong in this country, like making sure that we can get a handle on this outrageous healthcare system. Let's address the policy, but let's not hold our troops and our federal law enforcement officers, which, by the way, are putting their lives on the line every day. Let's not hold them hostage while we do it. And so if we end up in a situation where we haven't passed the appropriations bills and we're going into a shutdown, then we need to have an automatic CR every 2 weeks while we crank out those appropriations bills. Now, I, for one, think that needs to be coupled with senators staying in Washington, not getting paid to go back home, and also having their pay held. Both of those things together would put us in a place where we are pushing these things along, and there's minimal.
We took a big step forward to protect the health care of tens of millions of Americans in exchange for funding through January 31st. This agreement will give Democrats control of the Senate floor for a vote on one of our top legislative priorities, extending the Affordable Care Act premium tax credits. This is important when Republicans control every branch of government. The agreement reinstates thousands of fired federal workers and provides back pay to more than 1 million others. It advances 3 bipartisan funding bills for agriculture and FDA, for military construction and Veterans Affairs, and for the legislative branch. It restores a real bipartisan appropriations budget process. Republicans control the White House, the Senate, and the House, and they made clear over a period of weeks, including just this week, that this was as far as they would go as part of the shutdown talks. This was the only deal on the table. It was our best chance to reopen the government and immediately begin negotiations to extend the ACA tax credits that tens of millions of Americans rely on to keep costs down. Now, for me in New Hampshire, not only will it mean that 42 million Americans, including 75,000 in my state, will be able to keep food on the table. 29,000 Granite State families will be able to heat their homes this winter. 19,000 federal workers in New Hampshire, including more than 3,000 at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, will finally get paid. Now, I understand that not all of my Democratic colleagues are satisfied with this agreement, but waiting another week or another month wouldn't deliver a better outcome. It would only mean more harm for families in New Hampshire and all across the country. And this is only the first step. So let me be clear. No one in the Senate chamber wants to extend the ACA tax credits more than I do. I introduced that legislation in 2019. I fought successfully to pass it in 2021 and 2023, and I am 100% committed to getting this done. President Trump, Speaker Johnson, and Leader Thune, along with many rank-and-file Republicans, say they want to keep health care premiums at their current rate. With the government reopened, we must move quickly to deliver on that promise and to keep health care premiums affordable. The American people are counting on us to get this done. Senator King.
Thank you. I want to emphasize what Senator Shaheen just said. Those of us here and those of us certainly participating in the deficit are 100% committed to working on the issue of the ACA premium tax credits and preserving access to health care for millions of Americans. The question before us is how's the best way to get there? And it was our judgment after 6 weeks, going on 7 weeks of this shutdown, that path wasn't working. The test was last week when the majority leader put forward a proposal that was pretty simple, straightforward, 1-year extension of the tax credits. It was met with universal opposition in the Republican caucus. It wasn't going to happen. So the question before us, before those of us here who decided to vote yes tonight, the question was, does the shutdown further the goal of achieving some needed support for the extension of the tax credits? Our judgment was that it would not produce that result, And the evidence for that is almost 7 weeks of fruitless attempts to make that happen. Would it change in a week or another week or after Thanksgiving or Christmas? And there's no evidence that it would. What there is evidence of is the harm that the shutdown is doing to the country. What it's doing to millions of federal workers, but also what it's doing to tens of millions of recipients of SNAP. This is a true crisis for those individuals. Soup kitchens can't fill the gap. Food pantries can't fill the gap. SNAP is an essential part of the food food provision program in this country. And so we were faced with a strategy or a series of steps that wasn't working to achieve the goal we wanted with regard to the ACA, but it was at the same time creating hardship and difficulty for millions of people across this country. So I believe that we are closer tonight to a vote on the ACA tax credits than we were this morning. Because part of this agreement, and you heard the majority leader on the floor today say he is committed to putting a bill on the floor before the second week in December that would be drafted by the Democrats concerning health care and the ACA. That is a big step, because otherwise there's no way for the minority to get a bill onto the floor of the U.S. Senate. It has to be through the office of the majority leader. So that was a major step to get the majority leader to agree to make that commitment tonight on the Senate floor. So the sum is we are closer to the possibility of work on the ACA tax credits for the people of this country than we were yesterday and than we were a week ago, 2 weeks ago, or a month ago. So this agreement tonight is a win for the American people. And it's a win for those people that are so insistent, that I'm hearing from all the time, protect our health care. Our judgment is the best way to do that is to get a bill on the floor. Is there a guarantee it will pass? No. Is it a guarantee it will pass in the House? There is actually some very strong interest in the House, a possibility of a bipartisan bill and to get a discharge petition, and then perhaps we're on the way. And we have that expression from Republican senators who are interested in working on a bill that will deal with the ACA issue and perhaps additional health care issues at the same time. So what happened tonight is not the closing of a chapter, it's the opening of an opportunity. What the chapter it does close is the damaging shutdown that is only getting worse, that is only going to impact more and more people, and it's an opportunity for us to move forward on behalf of all of the people of this country on the issue of health care, but also on making the federal government function. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everybody. At a time when families desperately need relief, Washington's dysfunction is making life harder for families, and the last 39 days are proof of that. A record-long government shutdown paired with record-high health insurance cost increases is not the kind of history that the American people want Congress to make. Over the last several weeks, I've heard from Granite Staters who can't afford of their health insurance costs. I've also heard from families about the deep pain that the government shutdown has caused, made worse by a president who illegally and repeatedly chose to cut off help for families who are just trying to buy groceries. After weeks of bipartisan conversations, I voted today to reopen the government so that we can get back to the work of helping Granite Staters. This agreement funds SNAP and food assistance programs, ensures that law enforcement, air traffic controllers, and other federal workers get paid, reverses the president's recent reckless layoffs and prevents them from happening in the future, and crucially, gives Congress a clear path forward to protecting people's health care. Our work to deliver relief for families now enters an important phase. Congress has 1 month to engage in serious bipartisan negotiations to extend the Affordable Care Act's expiring tax cuts that help people afford their health insurance. And let's be really clear, part of what has been happening is the time period to make that meaningful extension of these tax cuts has been dwindling. We are getting closer and closer to the time in which families have to decide whether they can buy their health insurance or not and enroll in health insurance in this coming year. So my Democratic colleagues and I have been ready to work on this issue, on extending these tax cuts for months. With the government reopening shortly, Senate Republicans now finally have to come to the table. Or, make no mistake, Americans will remember who stood in the way. So I urge Speaker Johnson to finally return the House of Representatives into session and quickly reopen the government. And I urge all Americans in communities red, blue, and purple to continue to speak out about the importance of affordable health care so that families across America can get that critical care that they need. Thank you.
Thank you. And I thank my colleagues for their good work. The vote tonight, and you've heard all of us talking about this, the vote tonight was crucial to open the government because too many Americans, hardworking individuals, seniors, children, were suffering. I know in Nevada, particularly that is based on a service industry, tourism and travel, we are doubly hit. Tariffs, bad policies of this administration, and the shutdown was having an impact on travel to our state and quite honestly across the country. But it wasn't just that. We have federal workers that were suffering. We have TSA agents. We have airport controllers. And we were seeing lines to our food banks in northern Nevada. These were lines that I hadn't seen since the pandemic. And the stories were horrific. Seniors in line needing food because they couldn't get access to the food that they usually would get at the federal level. One man came and refused to say who he was because he was embarrassed and said, I shouldn't be here, but he needed the food. Mothers coming to the food bank to get food for their children. My colleagues know that opening the government was key to stopping that pain. But here's the thing. We can open the government and we can still fight to address this looming healthcare crisis. It is true. Right now, in our states and across the country, Americans are seeing higher costs, higher premiums for their Affordable Care Act. These are people that need access to health care. I have families that rely on the Affordable Care Act and these subsidies so that their children who have a rare disease can access their medication. I have small businesses who rely on the Affordable Care Act and the subsidies to help cover the costs for their employees. This is a fight that the Republicans need to understand is not just happening in Nevada, it is happening across the country in every state, including those red states. This fight tonight is, I agree with Senator Angus, is just the beginning. This is the beginning to show and fight for Americans across the country. Let me just say this. With the government open, we can focus on passing a full bipartisan budget for 2026 that starts with a minibus that will restore funding that President Trump cut. It delivers millions of dollars in critical funding to states like Nevada all across the country. And it, you will hear, blocks the administration from future rifts. We have an opportunity also to put Republicans on the record on the ACA. Are they committed to doing this? Are they committed? Leader Thune said he would come to the table on a health care once the government was open, and now he must follow through. If Republicans want to join us in lowering costs
for working families, they have the perfect opportunity to show the American public. I expect Republicans to be at the table in the next few weeks. I expect the White House to be at the table. And if they do choose not to come to the table, they can own the disastrous premium increases that will continue to rise. They will own the fact that Americans across this country are going to lose access to health care. We were elected in the Senate to work on real solutions that help working families. It's our responsibility to work not only here amongst ourselves, but across the aisle to solve these problems for the Americans, make their lives a little bit easier. And that's what we have done tonight.
So, hey, everybody, I'm the cleanup hitter because I joined this group I joined it 48 hours ago. Not for lack of interest. And I got to applaud Jeanne Shaheen and this group because they have been having open meetings that anybody could participate in on negotiation. But I had my hands full focused on the Virginia elections until Wednesday morning. And as soon as that was over, I have now engaged with a particular purpose in mind. I knew the Democratic appropriators led by Patty Murray were going to do the very best job they could to get these 3 approach bills queued up and moving forward. A bill, for example, that has very robust SNAP funding, very robust funding for the VA. I had confidence in that. And I had confidence in these guys that they were going to get the best possible deal they could get from Republicans on the ACA. We were in a situation where SNAP recipients were suffering, and there was no guarantee we would ever get to an ACA solution. Now we've got robust SNAP funding and a guaranteed vote, not a guaranteed outcome, but a guaranteed vote on ACA tax credits. But I engaged on the issue that I've been talking about for a month on the floor to Senator Thune, Katie Britt, Lindsey Graham, James Lankford, anybody who would listen to me on the Republican side. I've said what I need in Virginia, with 320,000 federal employees who live in households that probably encompass nearly 650 or 700,000 residents in my state, I need a moratorium on mischief. My Virginians have been suffering under this administration. The shutdown started on January 20. I need a moratorium on the punishing of the federal workforce. That's what I need. And so I joined this group to make sure that we could get important protections for federal employees. And what we have in this bill is the restoration of all the furloughed employees and a guarantee of their back pay, the restoration of all RIFT employees who got RIFT after October 1 with all of their back pay, and a guarantee of no RIFs. No RIFs going forward. 2 million federal workers, not just my 300,000, 2 million federal workers who are not uniform military now have a guarantee of no RIFs going forward. So they don't have to go into the holiday season with anxiety about what's going to show up on their email one morning at 5:30 a.m. That's a big win for 2 million federal employees, and added together with these other ingredients of robust appropriations bills and a guaranteed path forward to vote on fixing the ACA, that made me sign on and say, yes, we can do it. I had a number of Republicans on the floor tonight that said, we were amazed that you got that no RIF guarantee in there. And I'm glad that we did, and we all worked so hard on it together, and I have huge respect for my colleagues who made this happen. Thanks.
Senator. You say you're fighting on the Affordable Care Act, but what do you say to your colleagues who say this isn't a fight, this is a capitulation? You're agreeing to a vote on a bill that it almost certainly will not become law, and you're allowing that to happen.
Well, first of all, as long as the government shut down, the clear statement from Senator Thune and the Republican majority, and they control the Senate, the House, the White House, was we will not talk about health care with you. So there was no vote that we were going to get on the Affordable Care Act, premium tax credits. We have a guaranteed vote by a guaranteed date on a bill that we will write. Not that the Republicans will write, although I do think it's important for us to engage with them because we need a bipartisan bill that we know is going to get enacted to provide the relief that Americans need. And I think there's a commitment on the part of many of our colleagues to do that.
But there's no guarantee this will become law.
There was never a guarantee that it would become law.
Well, just to follow up on that, Senator, because we understand that this vote will happen, but
a vote on the extending the tax credits, it does not guarantee that it's going to happen. So how do you explain, though, to your constituents why it was worth it to put up this fight for so long when in the end you did not get your key demand?
Because it wasn't working. How long would it take to not get a response to say it isn't working? In other words, it's been 6 weeks. There's been the Republicans made it clear they weren't going to discuss the health care issue, the Affordable Care Act tax credits, until the shutdown was over. We tried to keep working that for 6 weeks. It didn't happen. The vote that we have is not a guarantee for sure. It's more of a guarantee. Here's the way I would put it. As I assessed it, there was zero chance of dealing with the ACA issue as long as the shutdown continued. Now, I don't know, 50-50? But there's a lot better chance now than there was this morning, because nothing was happening and there was no evidence that another week or another 2 weeks or Thanksgiving or Christmas was suddenly the Republicans were to come to us and say, oh, we want to now talk about the ACA. If they weren't going to do it by now, what's going to change in the next 2 weeks that's going to make them do it? And that was really the assessment. I would say, right, as of this morning, there was a zero chance of having a work on the ACA. Now there's a measurable chance. Will it be everything that everybody wanted? No, because we need 60 votes. And so there's going to be a negotiation. But Republicans have already started saying, well, here, if you did this or did that, maybe we can get there. So I would take a reasonable chance against no chance every day. And that's and the other piece is, and we didn't really emphasize this, there are 3 important appropriations bills in this that would lock in SNAP for the rest of the year at a very substantial rate, plus other benefits. Veterans funding is guaranteed if we can get these 3 bills through. So there's a plus on that. And I think the odds are that we have a better chance of doing something about the ACA than we did not going into this. At some point, you have to decide, what is the best strategic step forward. And we believe that the evidence is that what we were doing wasn't working, and therefore, let's try something else.
And the real question is, why would a president of the United States pit hungry children against sick children? And that is what President Trump has done. I mean, this is outrageous. We can't reach agreement on government funding, so the government shuts down, and even though the law is clear that he could fund SNAP benefits during the shutdown, he did not. And then he also said, and by the way, I don't really care if people's health insurance premiums get so high they can't afford their care. That's on Donald Trump. My vote today was to do 2 things, both equally morally important and imperative. One is to make sure that the government is functioning so that our kids eat, so that our elderly citizens eat, so that our air traffic controllers can get some sleep and earn money, get paid while they are working, so that our veterans are protected, and continue the fight to a realistic platform to get the premium tax cuts done. And if that is not successful, then shame on the Republican Party and shame on Donald Trump. But the American people will see who stands with them on health care and who does not. And that will be the platform of the next stage of the fight. I hope we can find bipartisan agreement on an extension of those premium tax credits. In New Hampshire, couples who are 60 years old or so earning $85,000 a year are seeing like a $15,000 increase in their insurance premiums. This has to get fixed. And we have about a month to do it before the harm gets to be irreparable. And again, if the Republicans can't come to the table and do something reasonable on this and make sure that people can afford their health care and that the whole private commercial market also doesn't see skyrocketing increases, then shame on them.
On the phone by former Senator Claire McCaskill, of course, an esteemed MSNBC analyst, political analyst. Senator, I understand you have some inside information on what might be going down as we're looking at the Senate floor right now?
Yes, I believe that you're going to see the Democrats meeting in caucus yet today, and as soon as tonight or in the morning, I believe there will be somewhere between 10 and 12 Democrats that will vote to reopen the government and to extend government funding for a few months to give them time to negotiate some important appropriations matters and also to begin negotiating some kind of relief for the American public on health care costs. It will not be the majority of the Democrats, but there will be enough that the government will reopen.
Okay, but that is with regard to the Senate. It was discussed by our colleague Kevin Fry, who said that the tenor of things in the House remain considerably different. There's not been communication between both sides. We're into the 7th week now of House members not being even on Capitol Hill at the behest of the leader, Mike Johnson. Give me your sense of what happens after this vote, if indeed you're right and your sources help with the 10, 12 Democrats you're saying that might say, great, we're going to vote to reopen the government under these conditions. What then?
Well, it puts tremendous pressure. I mean, Mike Johnson can stay on vacation. But what the Democrats are saying, those that are going to vote to reopen the government, is we have made it very clear to the American people who's on their side. We've made it very clear the lengths we will go to bring attention to increasing healthcare costs and everything increasing in terms of price. That they're looking after those people that try to make it all come out even at the end of the month instead of feeling like they're drowning in terms of their economic situation. So if Mike Johnson decides that after there's enough Democrats to begin negotiating in earnest about relieving healthcare costs, if he thinks that he can continue to tell everybody they don't have to come back to work until after Thanksgiving and they're on a paid vacation, I just think that would be political malpractice on his part. I would have to believe they will come back in and realize that they have an opportunity now to show whether or not they care about anybody but the billionaires.
We are getting word backing up your sources as well that the Senate Dems do plan to huddle for a caucus meeting. We're hearing around 5 o'clock, so that's an hour and 45 minutes or so from now. Will there be in that session a strategy of which Democrats will vote with Republicans? How does that work, or is it just an individual's choice?
Well, Alex, in most of these situations, it comes down to individual's choice. We are still, thank goodness, you can't gerrymander states. So we have Democrats representing purple states. We have Democrats representing states that have Republican leadership in their legislatures and in the governor's mansion. So you have some Democrats that are looking for a moderate path to reopen government, but with an eye toward really finding relief for the people that they've been standing strong on behalf of. So I think you could, clearly the ones that aren't running again will probably be voting yes. You're talking about Gary Peters, you're talking about Jean Shaheen, you're talking about probably some of them that are from purplish states that would be willing to do it. Sandberger said it's time to reopen the government. It wouldn't surprise me to see the senators from Virginia agreeing with her because of the impact it has on their constituents. So Angus King is very independent-minded. He was not happy about this in the beginning and foresaw that, yes, we can make a point, but eventually we're going to have to get the government open for the people who need it. So it will be, but there's not pressure put one way or the other. I will be very surprised if any of the senators criticize any of the other senators or colleagues in the Democratic caucus for the vote they take, whether they vote yes or whether they vote no.
But Claire, I should say, we've been on the air for a couple of hours, and it has been discussed several times on this broadcast already that Democrats can't trust Republicans. They can't trust the Trump White House to follow through on certain promises. Do you have a sense of what they can and can't trust Republicans on right now?
Well, let's remember this. There is still the 60-vote margin that's required in the Senate. The Democrats in the Senate, there still takes 10 or 12 Democrats on everything that the Republicans want to do, with the exception of reconciliation and a few executive appointments. But the vast majority of the legislating that Republicans want to do, they're going to have Democrats. So it's not like they don't have the opportunity to block things going forward. They can stand up and block again if the Republicans go back on their word and don't do what they're agreeing to do in this very public and very well-known negotiation. So it will be very clear what the Republican leadership has promised in the Senate, and it will be very clear if they break their word. And after the results we had in the elections just this past week, I think Republicans know that they're on notice. And I believe they will hold good to what they're promising they will do in return for these Democrats agreeing to reopen the government.
Claire, do you have any concern that the president's constant hammering on Republicans to end the filibuster is going to take root somewhere? I know at first there was a resounding no, and it was as if they were ignoring him and his, pounding on social media about this. But it's been suggested that there are some who are becoming more open to the idea. Do you worry about that being overturned legitimately?
I don't think so, because remember, you have to have a majority of the people to overturn it. So you would have to have pretty much every Republican to agree with it. And I am confident, particularly some of the ones that have been there for a long time, like Susan Collins, some of the appropriators, I am confident they would not be in favor of getting rid of the filibuster, because they know, especially with what happened on Tuesday. I mean, I think, and I said this on the air Tuesday night, I believe that the Senate is now in play, because you can tell that people are ready to vote, and they're ready to, restore some sanity with a guy tearing down the White House and sending out masked men to disappear people. I think there is an opportunity here, and they know that the chances of them being on the receiving end of a simple majority are pretty good. I mean, the Senate has gone back and forth in control over the last 2 decades, and it will continue to happen. So, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I think that they know that they would be really disadvantaged if a Democrat were to take the White House and the Democrats would control the Senate and they had done away with the filibuster. And it would cause a real yo-yo in government, even more so than we have now. So I don't think that would happen, because I don't think they could get enough votes to overturn it. They might get 30. They might get the MAGA hardcores, but I don't think they'd get the Mitch McConnells and some of those folks to agree to it.
Which also, I presume, indicates that whatever Donald Trump is saying, and he's saying, oh, the Democrats will do it if they get a chance, you're saying, no, they won't.
Yeah, I don't believe they will. And, there was a lot of pressure, as you might remember, Alex, for the Democrats to do away with it. And then some of the Democrats said, yes, we should. I don't think that will happen. I'll tell you what else won't happen, and I think it's important to make this point. How many years have the Republicans been yammering about Obamacare and how terrible it is and how they have a better plan? I have yet to see a plan from the Republicans that would give Americans relief on health care. I mean, we sent out the dogs looking for it when I was still in the Senate. Where is this repeal and replace? Well, where is the replace? They can never come up with a plan. And the idea that this guy thinks we can just send people checks is just so ridiculous. That doesn't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't bring the healthcare industry to the place it needs to be. So I'm not holding my breath for the Republicans to have any meaningful plan to help people with their healthcare costs, because if they had a plan, we would have heard about it by now.
Okay. MSNBC political analyst and former Senator Claire McCaskill, it's awfully good of you to call in on this really important today with all these developments. And you're welcome to call back if you hear more. We'll be happy to take you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Claire.
Thank you, Alex.
America is still processing what happened on Tuesday, November 4th, a night that rewrote the story of inevitability. Because what unfolded across this country was not preordained. It was not destiny. It was agency. Your agency that made Tuesday night's victories possible. On Tuesday night, my colleague Nicole Wallace, as part of our election coverage, wore a shirt that said something simple and profound. Democracy isn't a spectator sport. She's right. You can't just watch from the sidelines and expect democracy to succeed. You have to participate. You have to work at it. And on Tuesday, in state after state after state, that's exactly what you did. You showed up in historic numbers and proved what we've been saying all along, that you can change the narrative. You can change the outcome. You can change other people's minds. In Virginia, Democrats not only took the governorship and elected Abigail Spanberger, but voters elected the first woman ever to be governor of that state. They also elected Ghazala Hashmi as lieutenant governor, the first Muslim woman ever to be elected to statewide office anywhere in the United States. They also held the state Senate, and they flipped the House of Delegates, a direct rejection of the Republican agenda that was built on book bans and cultural division. In New Jersey, Democrats held on to the governor's office, electing Mikey Sherrill over an opponent backed by Donald Trump. After losing ground up and down the ballot last year, voters awarded Democrats a third term in a row in the governor's mansion in New Jersey, something that hasn't happened since 1961. And right here in New York, a movement took hold. Affordable living, childcare for all, free and fast buses, all promises made by Zoran Mamdani, the 34-year-old Muslim immigrant and self-described democratic socialist who was virtually unknown just a few months ago. He will now become the first Muslim, the first American of South Asian descent, as well as the youngest in over a century to hold the position of mayor of New York City. And in California, there was massive voter turnout at the polls for a special election. There wasn't even a name of a human on the ballot. Californians came out to